out on my front porch early in the morning. It's about 8 o'clock. I have, this is actually a yellow bowl. And in it, I have abacus. This is the reinvented abacus, which I didn't try the old abacus, so I don't know what the differences are. So, gotta light it again. Damn it! I've had a hard time with the light on this today. It's just such a. I opened a new tin. And usually I'll lay some out to dry out, and I should have. My second bowl already of this. I've had a couple of bowls of others, but they're laying around. This is the one I've actually finished one of these. And Bearded Bristol, who's given away some really neat presents. And usually I do a support video, just so you know. I usually never say I want entered in the contest, but doggone it, I want interest. I do want to be entered this time. He is fantastic to me, in my ignorant, female opinion. Pretty good artist, and I would love to have. I would love the prize this time. Usually I say I don't really care, but this one, I do care. I do want to be entered. So, oh, that's really off the subject, isn't it? He wanted to know some of our childhood memories. Well, all my old followers, they know the story of us kids dancing in the smoke from my dad at night to be monster-proofed. And some of you know what I think of Burley. I think it makes a great little fairy dress because I grew up in Burley Fields. My mom was like a really progressive mom and a lot of fun, and made us dance and go to bands, and whether we wanted to or not, we had to become interested in music, and so we did. We're all rock and rollers. But coming up this year, here in Leavenworth in a couple weeks, is going to be the total solar eclipse. We are in the pathway. So we will get to see it's 99.98% of it. So there will be a little bit of a glow, but we only have to go a few miles to St. Joe to see it total. So St. Joe is just going to be so crowded. Actually, Leavenworth is going to be crowded. You can't get a room here in Leavenworth already, and I got some friends coming in from out of town. But this year, I'm going to watch the lunar eclipse from my hot tub. Tonight is I'm sorry, it's the solar eclipse. I keep saying lunar. The lunar eclipse is actually tonight and I think tomorrow night, but it's seen more from Australia. I think gets to see it. I know India gets to see it. I know, seems to me like maybe, I don't know. I'd have to look at the path because I don't really know the path of the lunar eclipse. What people don't realize is eclipses come in pairs. If you're going to have a solar eclipse, almost always either a couple weeks before or a couple weeks after, you will have a lunar eclipse. This year it's before, and so tonight is the lunar eclipse for the solar eclipse. But that's just because it's so moist and really tasty too. It's got Virginia Burley and just a little bit of Cavendish in it. I really like the flavor of it. I like it mellows a little bit more with that Virginia in it to me. And it's not so overpowering on the Cavendish that I can't stand to smoke it without thinning it down. They've already thinned it down with a little bit of Burley in there. The Burley always kind of hits me at the back of the throat along with that Cavendish, but that's just the way some tobaccos affect different people. Oh, I am so off subject. All right. Well, anyway, the reason for this was he wanted to know, the Bearded Bristol wanted to know some of our childhood memories. And like I said, I already told you so much about them. I've been on YouTube quite a while, and so most of the world already knows my childhood. I have no secrets. But I'm going to talk to you about the eclipses. A lot of the tobacco houses are on the coast, a lot in New York, a lot that was just the way it was back in the 60s and 70s and stuff. So in 1963, I'm still a kid, and we were traveling with Dad during one of these trips to the tobacco warehouses. Warehouse number 17. I don't even remember who the growers were or the blenders were. But that's not unusual. In a tobacco warehouse, there's not necessarily blenders in that tobacco warehouse. They were selling bulk tobacco. And my mother's family was in tobacco and had tobacco fields and stuff for quite a while. So it's in my bones. It's in my blood. On a cellular level, I am a tobacco nicotine queen because of growing up around it all the time. So the eclipses. We were on the East Coast, and I was only like, I think 7 or 8, maybe 9. Let's see. It was in 1963. So I remember stopping at a hardware store back then in this little town down on the coast there, like by New York or something. And my dad went in, and he came back out, and he just had tons of stuff. And they loaded it into the car. We had a station wagon back then. And we drove for miles and miles and miles up the coast. I had no idea why we were going. None of us knew. None of us kids knew. And we went to Maine. And we went to, for some reason, I keep wanting to say we went to Bangkok, Maine, but I know that's not true. But, you have a little girl's memory here, not an adult. And I guess I could Google it or something, but I don't know. And we went out to this campground up there, and we were there like for 3 days. And then one day, in the middle of the day, it started getting dark. It was like twilight was coming on. And we're in a little wooded area, but we do have hills and stuff close by us. And my mom gave us each this shoebox, and it was empty. But there was a little hole in the top, and the side was cut out. And she said, come on, we're going to go watch the eclipse. And I'm like, well, I'd read about eclipses, but I'd never seen one, so I wasn't sure what I was expecting. But it was beginning to get a little bit darker, and we walked up to the top of the hill, me and my sisters and my mom and my dad and a bunch of other people. It wasn't just us. It was like a little campground of people. And we went up to this little hillside, and we're all sitting there, and it's getting darker and darker. And my mom says, okay, take and look into your shoebox and make sure that the top is pointed up. So we did. And she kind of helped us get it to the right angle, I guess. Back then, my mom was a really neat, progressive mom. So she got us to where we could see what was going on. By looking through the shoebox, you could see that little hole in the top. You could see where the sun was beginning to be eclipsed by the moon. Because back then they didn't have solar glasses that were just available for everybody. And, cardboard. So nowadays you can just go buy them anywhere. But back then, it was still not as commercialized back then. I know that there was lots of scientific groups, I'm sure, that was there and stuff like that, but we weren't in the city where all of this was happening. We were out in this little campground, out there in the middle of nowhere. I know that it was a campground that didn't even have running water or showers or anything like that. We had to bring everything with us. There was a hole dug that we went to the bathroom in, and it wasn't like campgrounds, or it wasn't really a campground. It was just a place where a bunch of different people parked their vehicles, threw up some camping gear. We had a couple of big fire pits, and it was really all about that eclipse, although at the time we didn't know that's what it was about. We had heard, you overhear things as a kid, but you don't know what they're talking about, And so we got to set up on that hill with our shoe boxes, and my mom and dad and a bunch of people around us, and we got to watch our first eclipse, our first solar eclipse. Now, we'd been watching lunar eclipse all the time, anytime we could, and we traveled a lot. So there was a lot of times we were in areas, and sometimes I think my mom and dad kind of set it up so we were in those areas at the right time. But we'd gotten to see a lot of partial lunar eclipse and total lunar eclipse, but this was one of the few times that we got to see a solar eclipse, and we were so excited about that. And I mean, we talked about nothing else for years and years, and I think that's probably when I first decided I wanted to go to the moon, to be able to see this stuff up there. I'd always been interested in going to the moon and being an astronaut. I just didn't follow through. You got to be a little bit smarter, a little bit more physically fit, and not as lazy as I was. And I was a lazy child too. So then we, in 1970, because I was still in when I was in high school, but hadn't graduated yet. They, my godparents live in Mexico, and they still live in Mexico, and so they live in Taxco, which is up in the mountains, the silver mines and stuff. So we'd been visiting them, and we all, got into a little caravan of us, went down to the bottom of Mexico. And when I say the bottom of Mexico, I mean the bottom of Mexico. I mean, we traveled forever, it seemed like. But back then, you could drive a lot faster and things. But not all of us had good cars. My godparents' family had good cars, but the amount of people that was going, we didn't drive the speed limit because there was too many old cranky cars that were going with us and stuff that was carrying all this equipment. And we went to the very bottom of Mexico. And I say the very bottom because it was in the little bitty skinny part, because I know that it was only an hour away to go to one beach and then only a few hours away to go to the other beach. So we were so close to beaches that it's only going to be a 3-hour span across the whole part of that, Mexico. So we were in Mexico, and it was 1970, and we got to see another solar eclipse. Well, by then the glasses and stuff had started coming out, and we did have these great, big, thick glasses that you couldn't walk around with because you couldn't see through them. I mean, we were talking about glasses that were like that thick. It was such thick glass. They were heavy, hard on your nose, and we didn't all have them. Only the adults had them, but they shared them with us kids. Otherwise, we had our shoebox with the side cut out and the hole in it, and we knew what that was about because we'd already done this solar eclipse thing. So, but none of the little Mexican kids and stuff that we were with knew about it. So and you can remember we spoke a little bit of Spanish, but for the most part, kids don't have to know the language. We have a language of our own when you're children, and you can talk to other children with your own language, the childhood language of here, that and there and there. And we did speak enough to. So we taught all these little kids how to watch it through their shoebox. And so once again, we got to see another solar eclipse. And that was just so, so, so exciting to us because once again, we're not all the way grown. Well, then in 1979, I got a phone call from some friends, and they said, let's go to Portland. And I'm like, okay, what for? And they said, a solar eclipse. And I'm like, I was in heaven. I mean, it was like I was right on board. I mean, we were packed up and ready to go, and we went to Portland. And gosh, what's that? For some reason, I'm thinking that was in March around my birthday, but maybe that was the one in Mexico. Anyway, so for like a birthday gift, it had to have been about my birthday time. Anyway, so for a birthday gift, they paid my way to Portland, and I went to Portland, and once again got to see the solar eclipse. Now, what a lot of people, and I'll explain this in a minute because one of my friends is so stupid, but anyway, today, anytime there's a solar eclipse, there's also a lunar eclipse. And so right now, tonight, maybe even tomorrow night, there will be a lunar eclipse, and that will be taking place, though, I think I want to say in India, Australia. I think I think I'm not sure just in what part of Australia it's going through, but tonight, people like Alex George maybe or uh, Pipe Nutter and them, if they want to travel to it, they should be able to see it. But I believe it's still only a partial lunar eclipse. I don't think it's going to be a total lunar eclipse, but they're going to get to see the other side of it. They get to see the lunar side, and we get to see the solar side. And this is going to be here in Leavenworth in 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be in exactly 2 weeks is the total solar eclipse here in Leavenworth. And all of Leavenworth is so excited about it. It's going to be crowded. I've got friends coming in. It will be pretty neat. But so sometimes what kind of provokes a memory of the past is something that's going to happen now. And in my case, with this total solar eclipse coming into into Leavenworth, I'm going to be sitting in my hot tub watching it, in case you're wondering. But it was so neat to have gone through 2 or 3 of these. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that have seen the lunar eclipse. There's one every year, maybe 2, depending on what time frame it is. But this year, like I say, it's going to be really exciting because I get to see the total eclipse here in my own town, in my own house. And this will be making another memory. Now, this isn't necessarily a childhood memory, but it evokes those memories from before. And with us talking about, me being in Mexico, I remember going to the festivals in Mexico and eating bugs. And in my mind, as I'm thinking about this coming up, goes through my mind these memories of my grandparents and my godparents and some of the exciting times that we had in Mexico. And so this is, that's kind of a what happens now is what helps us remember the memories of past. I was watching one of the other pipers doing a VR about this, and he was talking about snakes and turtles and stuff, and it reminded me of when we lived in Arkansas. We'd watch Tarzan. Back then you only had 3 stations, and they weren't on all the time, but we had watched the Tarzan movie where he was walking across the snake pit. So when we were a kid, we weren't afraid of nothing. My mom had already taught us the difference between a poisonous snake and a non-poisonous snake. By the time we were 6 or 7 years old, we weren't afraid of snakes. Strawberries. They had these sticks, this pole that would have this little piece of wood on the bottom. And all of us kids, now the berry fields, the strawberry fields were the first fields, and then it would go into the raspberry fields, the blackberry fields, and into the grapes and stuff. And so we were organic farmers, so we didn't put chemicals on them. We did it with ladybugs and snakes and stuff like that. Back in the old days, there was organic farming. People just didn't make such a big deal of it. That was just the way it was done, sometimes cheaper than chemicals. But us kids would line up along the path of the fields, and here would be the rows and rows of the strawberries, and us kids would line up in a path, and we would start taking our stick and we would thump them. And what you're doing is you're thumping the ground, and that's causing a vibration. And the snakes would run from that vibration. So as us kids were all in a row, and we were all, going down these things, and we're doing this thing with our sticks, thumping those little pieces of wood on the ground, the snakes would try to get away from us. And so what would happen is that at the very beginning, you'd just see a couple. But, the further along you got, the more rustling and the more noise. And then pretty soon you'd start seeing them out there right into the rows. They were busy getting away with us. And our purpose was to go ahead and drive them into the next field, which would be the raspberry fields. And so that's what we did. So by the time we got to the end of those rows, there would be just little rivers of snakes, going away. And it was such a fun time. I mean, we just weren't afraid of snakes. I mean, they were part of life. When you're on the farm, you see them all the time, So, and especially, like, say, the way we farmed, we got to see quite a few snakes. My mom had taught us years ago that if it's round, put it down. So if the pattern went all the way around, that was going to be a poisonous snake. Now, there was a lot of imitators, and we didn't mess with the imitators either, because why? There was enough snakes, and we knew how to go around them. And we also knew that usually if you don't bother them, they're not going to bother you. And that was pretty true of everything except for blue racers. And they like to race you, you know, so that was kind of fun. We would find one on the side and we would race it. I mean, we never won, but you know, it was like we just didn't have that fear of snakes. And Darwin, I think it was saying that you know, he remembered some snakes and stuff, and it was a water moccasin, I think he was talking about. But like I say, it's always kind of neat to hear other people's stories of their past. So my past memories was remembering those different eclipses, and that's what this was really about. And I am entering this contest, so I want my name in that hat because I think it's just such a neat idea to actually have one of our pipers, you know, immortalize us into a drawing. So happy, joy, as always. You know I'm watching you.